Hello and welcome to Dots, Lines, and Destinations. This is episode 96 and it is November 19th, 2015. This is Seth sitting in hosting today. Steven is on the DL, the injured version, not the down low. I guess the kids still say that. I don't know. And that snarky laughter you hear in the background is a good friend and special guest back on again, Ed Pizzarello. Ed, how you doing?
Hey, good. How are you?
Doing very well, thank you. Obviously, the Pizza in Motion. We'll tell that story later. Pizza in Motion blog and otherwise intrepid traveler. I keep forgetting that we have a trip coming up together in the very near future. I should probably start helping you plan that. We're doing the inaugural flight on Norwegian down to Martinique. Is that right?
Yeah, and it's interesting because now there's all these people that are jumping on board from all the tickets that Norwegian gave away through Inside Flyer, and what was a simple trip is now 60 people, that a bunch of which claim had the exact same idea as we did 3 months ago to go on the inaugural.
Wow, I'm glad they finally got with the game.
Hey, and I do hope Steven feels better soon. It sounds like he's very under the weather.
Yeah, and Merlot and Foz are their typical flying somewhere, unable to call in cells, but I don't believe either of them is injured. So, yeah, we miss them too, but not in the same way. Anyway, before I get myself in any more trouble, let's jump into the show here. Dots, Lines, and Destinations. This week's dot, Toronto City Centre, the Billy Bishop downtown airport, has home to Porter Airlines and was recently maybe almost sort of thinking about finally allowing jets to operate there again, which would have been huge for Porter. Porter had 30 Bombardier C-Series jets lined up to be ordered. 12 were firm, 18 options. But it was contingent on getting the runway extended a tiny little bit and being able to actually land and operate those jets at the airport. And the latest inbound Canadian government has said, not happening. So, interesting times, though. I sort of read the meta version of that and sort of got the details from everybody else. Ed, it sounds like you actually read the real deal agreement on what's going on with that sort of jets aren't allowed here document.
In fairness, I didn't read the whole thing, although I did try to digest a chunk of it on the plane. And what got me interested in it was your blog post the other day when the news broke about the minister coming out and more clarifying this comment than anything else. And I read through some of the old slot restriction stuff from 4 or 5 years ago that you had written, and that sort of led me to the document. And I found it interesting that they made the document almost overly redundant. It definitely says that
Is that just because it was in both English and French, or?
I didn't find the French version yet.
All right.
It's on. I'm sure it's online somewhere.
Cherchez Google.
Cherchez Google. They do definitely carve out jet aircrafts. They go so far as to define what they say is not a turboprop. There also seem to be some noise ordinance restrictions in the documents as well as multi-engine turboprops seem to be excluded, although it would seem like they're landing now, so maybe there's some sort of a waiver for the planes that they have now landing there from Porter. And I thought it was interesting, and I don't think Porter would do this given their size and scope, but a very quick reading of the document seems to indicate that the airport could fine any airline that landed a jet there $5,000 per occurrence, and the agreement seems to be adjudicated and resolved once that $5,000 is paid per occurrence. So in theory, an airline that wanted to try and land a jet there might be able to do it if they were willing to pay those fines on a per flight basis.
As long as an extra $50 a head. Am I doing the math right on a 100-seater?
Yeah, it is. So I mean, it's certainly doable, but I also don't know. I know that they wanted to extend the runway, so I don't know. I didn't get a chance to look at the actual length of the runway and what they expect the takeoff distance will be for the C-Series. So I don't actually know if they can land it or take off there.
Yeah, I mean, the little bit I read suggests that getting the runway extended is actually within, there'd need to be some landfill and whatnot to do it because, this is actually an island in the middle of the lake there. But it could be done, and it actually would be within the sort of same footprint as exists today. So that wouldn't be as big a deal. But I also kind of wonder about the, we're just going to charge you $5,000 a pop thing. At some point, obviously, it's completely untenable. There's no way they're going to make that much money to be able to justify doing that. But, at some point, do you you almost want to be like, yeah, we'll just keep doing this to piss you off. Come try to collect and see how long you could go. I mean, you don't do that when you have a reasonably successful and profitable airline and a bunch of brand new multi-million-dollar planes that you just bought that are now going to basically be seized and used as the collateral on those $5,000 payments. But
No, you don't, and it's also unclear. There's two different sections in the document. One of them actually talks about the money being calculated in constant June 1981 dollars. So I'm sure if we overlaid
so maybe a little more than that.
it might. It certainly, I would certainly imagine with currency over the past 30 years, it would. It's unclear from a quick reading which one would dictate. But suffice to say, there's also a clause in there that says that if they do fill in any land, I believe that there's a clause in there to automatically extend the agreement for some very large period of time if the authorities agree to increase the size of the land.
Interesting. So if they extend the runway, it also extends the no jets time unless, again, someone comes back and sort of renegotiates that and whatever.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I believe there were three things I saw. If they extend the runway, if they build a bridge, or if they build a tunnel for cars. And as far as I know, I think they build a pedestrian tunnel, but not a vehicle tunnel.
Yeah, it's just the pedestrian tunnel there, which
yeah.
I think is unfortunate because I really like riding the little ferry back and forth. But
oh, did they stop the ferry?
No, they still have it, but it's so and I think that's how cars still get back and forth, so they have to keep it going. But it's one of the more interesting and bizarre kind of airport commutes, although it is now on the list of airports I could walk to, which I actually sort of keep track of those from time to time. So.
I really do think it's interesting too that the locals are the ones obviously that would have the most concerns about the noise ordinance, but from what I read, and certainly could be wrong, it seemed like the federal government was the one of the three parties that was declining to reopen negotiations. That the local government was actually in favor of reopening negotiations on the agreement.
Yeah, and I one of the comments I got on the post I wrote about this last week, or earlier this week, I guess, I don't remember anymore, suggested that it was locals acting through the federal government because they campaigned and helped elect the federal government. It's something about you have to form a coalition, and it's based on members of their equivalent of whatever they call their House of Representatives and things like that. So I don't entirely understand it, but so it goes.
Those crazy Canadians.
Yeah, but anywho, it's a interesting scene, interesting thing. I just am disappointed because I would love to see the C-Series fly. That in and of itself seems it'll fly a little bit, but it's unclear just how many will be delivered and if it's Bombardier is going to go bankrupt doing it, and that's unfortunate because it is a very nice, quiet plane. It's actually just as quiet as the Q400s that they let go in and out of there, so that's part of why I think the whole fight over this thing is kind of ironic at this point. I also wish that downtown airport could get more traffic just because it is so convenient to Toronto city center. But
yeah, I agree, and Porter certainly introduces some competition into the market up there that's helpful to keep prices down. I'd love to see the C-Series fly as well. It doesn't look good for it to fly out of Toronto, and I don't see a ready place where somebody like Air Canada and WestJet is going to start taking orders for it. It's certainly a little bit of a troublesome size to make inroads in the U.S. in a heavy way.
Yeah, I mean they got some European sales lined up. I think Swiss is going to be the launch customer, and at the Dubai Air Show they actually confirmed the CS300 launch customer, and I completely forget who it is. So, yay me. Anyway, we'll see what happens with that. Lines. Couple interesting new routes announced in the last couple weeks since we talked. One of them, American, finally confirmed their Los Angeles to Auckland service.
Yeah.
Surprised?
Given what some of the comments that Doug had early on about international expansion, a little bit surprised. Yes, but he seems to have really. I don't think drink the Kool-Aid is the right way to say it, but they definitely seem to be on board with international expansion. Some of that may be that they realize that they're never really going to get rid of Spirit and the likes of that in the U.S. anytime soon, and so they certainly can make hay on these international routes much more so than they can trying to compete with Spirit flying nonstop to a bunch of their cities.
Yeah, I think the interesting scenario to me in some sense is almost like Parker's been chomping at the bit to launch more international service for years. Right? Remember the Philly China route where they just never could get the right planes, but they got the slot and just all sorts of things like that have sort of been a lot of false starts. I almost sort of feel like Parker showed up and was like, "Ooh, look, I've got all these airplanes. What can I do with them?" It's just fun. Like, it's like kid in a candy store. He's really just having a lot of fun.
Yeah, I agree, and I mean they're certainly well positioned to do it, especially with all the plane orders that they have. And I think that's the cool thing about both this launch and the Sydney launch. It's also great from the standpoint of elites from the American Airlines program being able to potentially access upgrades on American metal to destinations that you couldn't have considered for years and years and years.
Yeah, and I think Auckland especially, just adding that as a nonstop from the States on One World is a huge move. But it's it's interesting competition. It's also United starting up San Francisco, Auckland, and obviously Air New Zealand has its routes from both Los Angeles and San Francisco to Auckland. So a lot of competition there. But
yeah, that's the interesting thing. If you think about it, I mean, there hasn't been it's not like there's been a ton of people flying from the U.S. to New Zealand, and we're adding not a ton of seats, but a decent amount of seats. One would think that that's probably good for those of us that like to try and find cheap fares or upgrades or things of that nature until they fill the routes out. But is there really enough demand for that many more seats to go between New Zealand and the U.S.?
Yeah, I find it hard to believe, but I mean, we're talking about adding more than 50% additional daily seats.
Yeah.
There's a couple 777s from Air New Zealand, and now you're adding a couple 787s, so they're not quite as big, but they're certainly bigger than half a 777. So it is a lot more seats going to be in the market very soon.
Yeah, and a lot of premium seats. I mean, that's the big thing. Like, I certainly understand that you'll have travelers that will go back and forth, and there'll certainly be some business travelers, but I would think my gut tells me it's going to be harder for them to fill that many more premium seats on a daily basis. I'm certain there'll be peak days, but I can't imagine they're going to fill 30 days a month of two more premium cabins between the two countries.
Yeah, that'll be to keep our eye out. I guess the question there then becomes: is it do you put some business class seats on sale? Do you hold out? Is it an up fare of some sort kind of thing, or do you just hope for mistakes because there's extra seats?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the airlines price that. I mean, certainly the 787s are cheaper planes to run. We know that, but it will be curious to see if they find ways to fill those cabins on the days where they can't with folks that might be willing to pay a little bit more. There's certainly a lot more reason for that. Now, I mean, especially given the length of those flights, but a lot of variables there. And I mean, you've also got the variable where, not necessarily Auckland, but Sydney, where American at least floated the rumor that they're exploring whether they can offer upgrades to their elite members on Qantas flights. Though I think that that's a fairly pie in the sky hope at this point.
Yeah, and I didn't read a ton into that, but was that for the long haul segments?
It was very vague, so hard to say.
Right? Qantas doesn't really just give its elites upgrades.
No, I know. That was why I thought it was an interesting comment. I can't see it happening over the ocean. So again, there too, it's one of those things where, with American reducing the number of system-wide upgrades they're giving their elites, does that mean that they open up more space? Probably not everywhere, but on a route like Auckland in the beginning, I think there's at least a reasonable chance to expect that they'll try and fill those seats with paid upgrades, and when they can't, that may be a really good opportunity for folks to use system-wides.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that. And you teased it a little bit there, talking about reduced system-wide earnings. We're going to not get too into the announcement of the new American changes, which we're recording this on Tuesday, and it came out earlier this afternoon, mostly because I haven't had time to think about it too much and want to get the other guys in on it as well. But it did happen. We know about it. We're just not talking about it. So, come back next time. Couple other route announcements looking at South America, and one of them is GOL is switching its flights to Miami and Orlando to be seasonal routes from year-round, which is a significant cut. There's also another comment that I don't think I shared with you in advance, so sorry about the surprise news here, but there's some comments from IATA saying that Argentina is starting to look like the new Venezuela, with currency getting trapped there and airlines not being able to get their money out, and the risks and challenges that creates in terms of whether airlines are going to keep operating for the long term and things like that. And I look at that and think to myself a couple things. One, we've had spectacularly cheap deals in and out of Brazil for the last couple months now, and those don't seem to show any sign of ending. Even with Gol cutting some of its service, I think we're going to still see that capacity not dropping too much. Which good if you want to visit Brazil. I guess we got the Olympics coming up next year. That could be a good idea.
Yeah.
But also, it seems very, very possible that that whole part of the world's economy is going to crater at some point, worse than it already has, which is scary.
Yeah, and I did a little poking around. I couldn't find out. Maybe what Gol's definition is of seasonal when it comes to these routes. When they think that they'll come back on.
Oh well, that's the joy of being an airline and declaring something seasonal when you cut it. You get to decide when the season starts again.
Okay, so I wasn't missing it. I couldn't actually find a time where they chose to resume service. So it's unclear whether these are cuts that are going to be, a much longer season than one would expect when you hear the word seasonal.
Sure. United cut its Athens service to be seasonal 4 years ago, and it's coming back this coming summer. So something like that, right? I mean, there have been plenty of examples of things like that in the past. So Delta, the Delta dartboard has been seasonal basically since it was since its inception. So.
Yeah, and I could definitely see with them having they have Miami and Orlando. I think I could definitely see them paring that down. I mean, even as popular as Disney is, that's still a bit of a surprising plane to fill. Given all the other.
There's a lot of traffic back and forth between Brazil and Orlando. TAM runs it once or twice a day. What's it called? The Azul is adding service there, or has service there, and chose not to go to JFK but to stick with Florida.
Yeah.
Right, when they originally announced their long-haul service, they said New York, and then they said, forget that. We're having too much fun down here in Florida. Or making too much money, depending on how you look at it. So there does seem to be a ton of demand for those flights. So I don't completely understand it, but there it is.
Yeah, I don't completely understand either, and I haven't looked at the fares to see where they sit. That would certainly be an interesting exercise to see. Are they commanding premium fares for those flights? And if so, do they try and I don't even know if they have aircraft that they could substitute in if they're not filling all the flights. But I just don't. Like you said, the South America is still in a state of turmoil now. I don't see things improving over the next 6 months to a year, so I wouldn't be surprised if this season's longer than we think.
Yeah, I agreed on that. The last set of new lines to talk about, WOW is launching. That's the Icelandic low-cost carrier launching California flights starting next summer.
Yeah, I didn't know that they were thinking about that. I mean, I saw the 330s at one point on their list of planes that they were expecting to get. I don't remember when, but when you shot me the note on that, I looked around a bit, and I think those are the last planes that they have on order. So that's a pretty big move for them. That's a long flight and coach.
It's especially long flight and coach with tight pitch and minimal services. That said, I think we'll have to see how they configure the inside of the 330. If they stay with 242, it's going to be almost certainly more comfortable than the Norwegian 787. The seats will be wider. There'll be a little more space on board. It won't be as quiet, and it won't have the sort of humidity and moisture and whatnot. But
didn't you fly WOW?
I have not flown WOW yet. I've tried a couple times to make it work, and I just have not gotten it to happen. Our good friend Cynthia, who's been a guest a few times on the show, has flown them. Although every time she's a guest, she talks about boats. So,
yeah, I do remember those. Yeah, I guess there's demand. I would have to think. I mean, there's certainly more demand to go to Europe as time has gone on. I still question if that's the best use of those planes, but they must think pretty highly of it.
Long haul LCC, it's been tried a couple of times and never really stuck, but Norwegian seems to be making a go of it. Just added a whole bunch of new planes to their order book, so they're going to try. And WOW is doing the same thing, right? A lot of connecting people into Europe across Iceland. So.
No, it certainly is an easy hub, and I think the thing that sometimes we can overlook with the miles of points game is how many folks don't have access to that sort of trough of ways to get across, and looking at a even a $200 fare, if they pass these $99 intro fares, is very appealing for folks who want to go to Europe. I know a bunch of folks who recently have been taking up the deals that Turkish has, going through Istanbul to places like Rome, where the tickets are disgustingly cheap, but you have to connect through Istanbul, significantly extending the flight.
8 extra hours en route. Yeah.
Yeah, and I heard from somebody the other day who did it, who apparently when they booked their Turkish flights, they actually got a hotel room. Turkish gave them a hotel room for their overnight, and they got essentially almost a full day in Istanbul, which isn't horrible, but that's essentially what you're talking about here, is you're taking the long way to Europe going through Reykjavik, but you're doing it for next to nothing, and boy, I mean, yeah, there sure seem to be a whole lot of people that want to do that didn't want to do it before.
Yeah, no, make it cheap enough, and it's a good idea.
I don't know. I mean, how much can you really make on that plane if you're selling seats that cheaply?
I don't know. Right, it's not all the seats being sold that cheap, so there's going to be some profit somewhere eventually. I'd like to think, but maybe not.
Well, some, but you're never going to get the sort of the big ticket guys in the front of the plane to help balance things out. How much can you really sell a handful of seats from LA to Europe, in coach for at the high end? I mean, you're going to be able to sell them for $800 to $1,000 one way? I doubt it. In quantity.
Yeah, not in quantity, but I think I guess part of the question becomes, how much do you need to sell them for to turn a profit? They're long flights, and the 330 isn't quite as efficient as the 787, and there's all those challenges. But depending on it's also early in the life of those planes, so the maintenance costs are lower, and it's early in the life of the company, so crew costs are lower. So part of that is the theory that you start and you build it up, and then eventually you can charge a little more. But also at some point you're depending then on other fares going up and other costs staying down to be the company that's still a chunk of change cheaper and can attract the right, blend. But, I came home from Paris earlier this year on Icelandair because it was the right price.
Yeah.
And you said the people like us who don't have, or who aren't like us that don't have access to all these things. I had lots of access to lots of options. And Icelandair, I needed a one-way ticket home from Europe, and that was by far the way to do it.
Yeah, I agree, and I remember you walking through that example with me, and the math definitely made sense. And I certainly see a chunk of demand there, but I mean, you're talking, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but the planes that WOW is flying now, and I looked at them before, you're talking roughly 200 seats, and they're going to put, almost 350 on the A330s? That's
a lot of seats.
That's a lot of seats to fill, and they're flying it, 4 times a week?
Yeah, something like that. So it's...
Yeah, 4 times a week times 2 cities with 3 frames. I mean, you know the math better than I do on whether they have a ton of cushion there, but it doesn't look like it.
Yeah, not a ton, but again, it must be nice to have money to burn and try to see if you can build a company. I'm happy to try to help them burn it.
Yeah.
See what we can come up with. You mentioned Istanbul briefly earlier, and moving on to the destination portion of today's show. You're going? I'm a little jealous.
I think so. Yeah. I was trying to put together this trip. I had, had some ticket fragments I was trying to use up, and it was, it's something that was on my list. I was supposed to do it about a month ago, actually 3 weeks ago, for a trip I was going to take to Dublin, and I had a ticket fragment left over from when I was in Stockholm last year, and it ended up with a day in Istanbul. And it's not a city I've planned a trip to, but if I could find an excuse to be there for a day, it's certainly something I'd love to experience. I just, I know the bits and pieces some folks have told me about it. I just don't know what I do in 24 hours.
Everything. Go to Asia. Take the ferry. Ride the metro. Blue Mosque. Basilica Cistern. Iskender. All the Iskender you can find. Actually, that's actually my weakness when I go to Istanbul is there's one type of food that I love. It's the Iskender. It's this basically like lamb kebab chunks, or like the ground meat made into little chunks of whatever meatballs type thing, served over toasted pita bread with Greek yogurt and brown butter and some tomato sauce. And it's like this melange of who the hell knows what, but it is delicious. And I was there this past February for a conference, and I think I was there 3 nights and had Iskender 4 times. I'm horribly addicted to this stuff. We've actually started making it at home now.
Really?
My wife is willing to treat me for doing something nice.
Which isn't very often, I'm
No,
assuming.
not nearly often enough, but I'm trying. I'm trying to become a better person so I can get more Iskender.
Well, you probably have to be home to qualify to be a better person too.
No, I'm not trying too hard on that one, it seems. Oops.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the other things I love Istanbul as a city. I think it's a lot of fun in 24 to 36 hour chunks. It's super easy to get around and has a ton of great history. Like just that I don't know. I think as Americans we're not so well versed in history, and the things that we think are old, most of Europe laughs at us for.
Yeah.
And the things that Europe thinks are old, Istanbul scoffs at them for. It's that it goes back so far. There's the not the Blue Mosque, the other one, Hagia Sophia, which is sort of there's like 4 or 5 great sites right all in one little corner of the city. And Hagia Sophia was a mosque, and then it was a church, and then it was a mosque again. It's one of those buildings that went back and forth so many times over the course of history, and has this great sort of feel to it. And you go inside, and it really is an incredible building. Just sort of the architecture, huge open space, and you can look around and you can actually see the layers of that history, but underneath the cracking paint. It's really cool.
Yeah, hearing stories from people like you and others about that, if I talk to somebody who knows what the definition of normal is, but somebody who thinks about normal travel, when they hear, why are you going to Istanbul for a day? They think I'm nuts. But there's so much that I've heard that's great to do in that city.
Yeah.
And having never been there, it's one of those spots on the map that I'd really love to check off. I don't see myself dedicating a week to it anytime soon. I don't want to be away from the kids that long, and I'm not going to take the kids there for a week vacation because it's just not enough of a destination for them to do it 4 years old and 9 years old that they'll remember it and have relevance. I'd rather they were both a little older.
Yeah.
So, how long do I wait to go? And if I've got a chance to squeeze a day in, it feels like one of those places that, nothing against Asia, but having done Japan and now Hong Kong, I think I'd certainly, if I had a day or two to go somewhere, I'd almost certainly pick a place like Istanbul specifically for the history.
Yeah. Well, it's also like half as far as Hong Kong.
There's that. And I liked Hong Kong, but I do like history. I'm a big fan of history, and there's certainly a bunch of that in Hong Kong. But like you said, there's this whole other level of history in Constantinople, as it were, that outdates so much more.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan. I booked purposefully 12-hour connections in Istanbul at least 3 or 4 times. So, and that was sort of somewhat by accident. We had a friend who got married there 7, 8, 10 years ago now. I'd have to go back and check. And so me and my wife went and spent a week in Turkey, and I can't get enough of it since. I go back almost every time I possibly can. So.
Yeah, and Turkish seems to make that pretty easy right now with the way they're selling tickets.
Yeah, they do. I'm a fan of that. So.
Although, again, most normal people don't choose to go to Dublin via Istanbul when they're leaving from the east coast of the U.S., but...
Yeah, it's triple the travel time, but, you get an Iskander, so there's something good that comes out of it.
Yeah.
Cool. You also, it sounds like you're trying to decide between Prague and Vienna on the same trip. I didn't quite understand what you're doing there.
Yeah.
Double up on destinations.
Double up on destinations. I'm trying to decide between the two, and I had gotten some advice from friends that Prague was the leader between the two, and Vienna was sort of in the running as well in the quest to hit 200 Hyatts when competing with Rubiano. So both cities seem like a cool place to go, and I can get back from both. One of the reasons why I leaned Vienna was I did find and held some inventory on a Austrian flight in business class, and I haven't tried that product, even though it's similar to others I've tried. But feel like something fun to try that I haven't gotten to do as a way back from this trip.
Yeah, we were in Vienna about a year ago now, and it was okay. It's a small town as cities go in Europe, so it's got sort of quaint, easy to get around, easy to sort of see things. It's quiet. It's a little sleepy, and their history was. It certainly has some. It has some of that old Europe feel to it, but it wasn't especially grabbing for us. We spent a lot of our time sort of just walking around and then through like the random streets and finding little cafes and bars to sit in and relax, more than feeling like there was stuff to see and do. Which is not to say that like sitting down and having a coffee or a beer is a bad thing to see and do, but it wasn't to us a lot of very specific, oh, you've got to go see these 6 sites kind of things.
Yeah, and on the coffee thing, I'd say, I can remember one of the first international trips I took with my wife. We were in Barcelona, gosh, probably 15 years ago now. And I remember finding a little coffee shop at the top of Las Ramblas that we enjoyed sitting in and people watching. So some of those places can certainly be fun places to absorb a city and be, immersed in the culture. But the other thing, too, is, Prague's what? Couple 100 miles from Vienna, so the other option is just go to Prague and find a way to get from Prague to Vienna, which I'm sure is easy and cheap, and do the day in Prague and head back to Vienna for the Austrian flight.
Yeah, does Austrian not have award space? Do they even fly it? I don't know.
I didn't look. Once I found the award space from Vienna to Dulles, I just figured, well, I'll be able to find some way to get from Prague to Vienna if I choose that route. It can't be that hard. Heck, there might even be train service. It's only a couple 100 miles.
Yeah, I like the way you think. I'll book this segment now and I can figure the rest out later.
Yeah, I'm not gonna be able to do that much longer if I don't think I'll requalify for United Platinum. So I can still do it. Free changes. That's probably the only benefit on United that I really enjoy right now. Is the rest of them are fairly diluted.
Yeah, that's absolutely my favorite still. But I'm just thinking I've got our Christmas New Year's trip, I think, is at least 5 different tickets so far. It's like, we get to the next stop and then I'll figure it out from there. Oh, look, a sale came up here, I'll figure it out from there. And completely piecemealed it together. Nothing better go wrong. That's all I'm saying.
Well, yeah, are you still platinum or no?
I am through the end of this year. I will be gold next year with Million Miler.
Yeah.
So it's it's only $25 a pop, so it's still cheaper than qualifying for platinum again.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing. Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not certainly not going to take a mileage run to go from gold to platinum on United.
Yeah. So let's hit some other big news now that we've gotten through the official portion of the show. Delta is changing Comfort Plus. That's their extra legroom product, and over the last couple years or year or so, they went from just a little bit of extra legroom to extra legroom with a free snack or free booze to extra legroom with a free snack and free booze and a weird little divider curtain in the cabin. And as of next May, it is actually going to be marketed and sold as a separate fare class. So if you want to buy a seat, you have to choose either Comfort Plus or regular economy. And actually, I guess you have to choose between Basic Economy, Main Cabin, or Comfort Plus, which are all in the economy section of the plane, but three different experiences within our main cabin or something like that. It's a kind of marketing bullshit, but
you got to wonder though, and I know I'm jumping way ahead here, but if anybody's crazy enough to do something that maybe we don't see coming, is Delta the first one to start ripping out some of their domestic first class sections, which are certainly nicer than what the Euros offer for some comparable flights, and just saying, hey, we're gonna give you a lesser product for more money and create some variability in terms of being able to move the curtain, if you will, and have as many quote unquote business class middle seat block sort of seats available as they need.
That's not where I thought you were going to go with this. So very interesting question. There was a year ago, there was some scuttlebutt that Delta was going to do that. They were going to make their first class product be called Premium Economy or Comfort Plus or whatever, and they were going to get rid of domestic first. And I poo-pooed the idea for a variety of reasons. I don't think it works for the international connections, mostly. But, this shift, I actually was thinking of it more as this is the move to where they're going to make a proper international premium economy.
No. I can't see. I just can't see them doing that. I don't think they can sell
really stupid in about 6.
Well, suffice it to say, they may try it. Yeah.
And I'll be or another.
Yeah. I know they can do the food service and the service. I don't know. I mean, a lot of that stuff comes down to corporate contracts and what can they fill, right?
Yeah, and well. Right, that's sort of the theory all along has been U.S. carriers haven't put in premium economy because they don't want to cannibalize their corporate contracts on business class.
Right.
And so the question becomes, have we hit the point where enough corporate contracts aren't buying business, or they've started shifting to the long haul carriers that do offer a premium economy product? Right? Is this the U.S. carriers just holding on, grasping for that last straw, so to speak, and seeing it finally slip away? And are they going to make the leap eventually? I feel like if anyone's going to do it, Delta would be first.
Yeah, I would agree. And I mean, look, I'm not trying to say that this is an easy move, but let's be honest. There's not much set aside like the transcons, Americans 321T and stuff like that. There's not much that's really that much more special about domestic first class in the U.S. It's a wider seat, and it certainly have a little more leg room in that, but you're not. There's not a ton in the way of great food. There is some, and then people will say, "Oh, I haven't tried this meal." It is getting better again, but not by but not by magnitudes, by percentages.
Sure.
And I don't see. I mean, this industry is cyclical. At some point, fuel's going to go back up. I just don't see them dumping a bunch of money into something that takes up more space. That they can find a way to monetize on a more consistent basis, especially because if you think about it, I mean, this is where I think Delta's got the best play. Right? They probably do the best of the three at monetizing the front of the plane, but there's plenty of free upgrades, quote unquote, going to elite members in those sections, and I think there's less stickiness created by that than we'd like to. Some people would like to think.
Yeah, no, I could see them sticking with the current 3-3 layout, not doing wide, blocking a middle or anything like that for Comfort Plus, but on the wide bodies putting in a proper premium economy seat is sort of where I'm thinking this goes. So it would have to be a new product, but it aligns them with Air France KLM. It aligns them with Alitalia, both of which are doing that, and that's, their main joint venture partner. They do a lot of business together across the Atlantic.
Yeah, they do, and I haven't looked to see what those guys are charging for those seats, but I would think on the international stuff they could certainly command a decent price for them. I know BA does that at Dulles, which I fly that product fairly frequently, and they certainly do command a nice premium over coach for that product, even though it's not significantly better.
Yeah, well, I guess significantly is all relative. I like it.
Yeah. No, I remember having I like it, but I remember having an argument with somebody about, oh my gosh, you get a 3-course meal on real China. And it's like, yeah, that's great, but the seat's really not that much more comfortable. The footrest is kind of sort of a joke. I think Amtrak has a better footrest.
That would not surprise me at all. Yeah, it's it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting. But have you written any letters to IHG lately?
So I don't know if I should put this on record because I don't know if this is actually illegal, but I decided you might as well start them young. And my 9-year-old daughter has a project. She's working on the letter. She's working on the cards to earn. I guess rewind a second. Do you want to frame up why we're writing letters to ISG?
Yeah, sure. I actually don't know all the details. It's something about enter a contest and you can do it online or you can do it by mail. Am I getting this mostly right? So, and I guess every entry is guaranteed to win?
Yep. Yeah, guaranteed to win at least 500 points, 500 IHG points, and certainly you can earn one of the other prizes, although I think it's collared to you can only earn one major prize and 2 minor prizes, but then they've sort of quasi-confirmed that you'll win at least 500 points for each entry, and you can enter 94 times, so works out to like 47.
Bizarrely irrational number, but okay.
Apparently it's one day for every day. It's one entry for every day of the promotion.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. Even though you can apparently send them all in as one big bunch, just in different envelopes. So told my daughter I would pay her to fill them out. I also gave her the math on it, which was, hey, look, we have some family up in Halifax, and if you do this gets us hotel rooms for an entire week to go visit the family for nothing. Well, not nothing, but the stamps and the envelopes and stuff like that.
$10 worth of supplies, right?
Yeah, $10 worth of supplies. I pay her, and she, they're, not mileage related at all, but they're studying pediatric cancer in school, and she wants to donate part of the money that she earns to pediatric cancer, and then she wants to go visit her family in Canada.
Nice. It's good to have staff, huh?
I know. You got to start them young.
I'll have to come over and see what I can convince her to do. Wow, that was okay. Well, good luck with that. I think I'm going to pass on the letter writing campaign.
Well, you can pass on it, but you might be able to hire my daughter to do yours for you.
Yeah,
Probably
I
not
don't know
gonna get a suite
what's the hourly rate these days. I don't know what does a 9-year-old go for.
I think she's gonna do all 100 of them for about $10 for me.
Okay.
But she'd probably after she's done, she's probably gonna want a pay raise.
Okay.
You
At
might be look-
$20 including supply, $30, I give her 20 plus the supplies. It might still not be a bad deal.
Might not be a bad deal, yeah. And I might be willing to go pick up envelopes and stamps for you.
Okay, so I got to cut you in another $5. So all of a sudden the numbers are starting to add up. I don't know about this.
Oh no, you don't have to cut. You don't have to cut me in. If you're supporting my daughter, then that means that's one less Target trip I have to pay for.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, I've got some nieces and nephews, and maybe I'll see how their handwriting is looking these days. Oy. I'm a horrible person. So mergers, nice one. Starwood and Marriott, and I use
What
the
is
term
nice about that
loosely.
merger?
Yeah, nothing for a lot of people, huh?
Nothing. I can't imagine there's any Starwood member who's going, "Wow, this is going to be such a great plus."
I think it's probably a fair assessment. Do you think
Marriott
do you think there's a lot of Marriott people are like, oh my god, this is great?
Well, here's the problem. I think, if you think about Marriott's reach, they have properties in a lot of these markets. I think so. I mean, I think it's nice because it'll give them some more award availability. And I think one of the things that Starwood does exceptionally well, better than anybody else, is the availability of award nights at incremental levels. So, hey, the base room is 10,000, but this hotel in Europe has 5 or 6 other room types that aren't online, and you can get those rooms for 11,000, 11,500, 12,000, and Marriott, to my knowledge, doesn't have that sort of availability, and so I think the Marriott members will certainly enjoy that. I don't think they're opening up a whole lot of new markets, but they're probably opening up other opportunities to use their points.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I get the more places to redeem and more incremental options thing. I feel like Marriott is doing what it can to expand and has been aggressive in expanding, right? They bought 3 other hotel chains last year, all much smaller than Starwood, obviously, but they have not been shy about picking up some extra stuff along the way. So I just wonder, we hear, Twitter and or Inside Flyer or Flyer Talk or any of those places, been a whole lot of Starwood people concerned, somewhere between very concerned and horribly pissed and upset, and the Marriott contingent has been relatively quiet. And I wonder if they're happier. It's like, yeah, whatever, it's a couple thousand more hotels, but why do we care?
Yeah, there's probably some of that. I also think from an industry standpoint, a technical standpoint, every article I read talked about how this gives them more ability to price things, and this is going to give them leverage against the OTAs. And this may be another thing, because I think you commented on this. I think this may be another thing where we end up on different sides of the coins. But with the way commissions have come down and where I think Marriott is on commission numbers, I just can't see that this is the big thing that gives them more control. I think they were going to get there one way or another with the strategy they were on. Maybe this speeds things up a little bit, but I can't say you're going to be able to point, back a couple of years from now and go, aha, see, that's where they were able to get control of things.
That's fair. I'll give you that. I mean, I think it helps them in the controlling the distribution expenses and sort of giving them a little bit more leverage, but I'm actually not entirely convinced that they're ever going to be able to finally say, aha, look, we finally got control, quite frankly. So.
I don't know. I'm on the other side of that coin too. I do think that they're gonna continue to take back control. I'm surprised it hasn't moved more quickly. I understand, the legs on some of the contracts, and also just the fact that you've got so many franchisees out there that dump inventory to some of these places, and that's harder to control from a brand standpoint. But I still think they're behind the curve on where they should be on getting better control of their inventory.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the thing to me is the OTAs and various other solutions sell such a large percent of the hotel rooms, way more than I think in the U.S. market, especially airlines are seeing. Right, the U.S. airlines managed to actually bring back a lot of that booking in house, and I just feel like the hotels haven't managed to do that yet for whatever reason.
Well, they haven't given a whole lot of incentive to do so. I mean, the only fence they really had was the loyalty program, and we know there's so many people that don't collect hotel points, just like they don't collect airline miles. They they go with the hotel that's where the wedding is, or where where everybody else is staying, or those sorts of things. They're not necessarily saying, well, I've got to go spend my Marriott points. It's certainly a cross section of frequent travelers that do, but I think that's where the OTAs thrived. But let's be honest. Look at the results in the quarterly earnings reports. It's not like the OTAs are killing it from a revenue standpoint.
No, they're doing okay on the revenue side, but their costs are also crazy high from an advertising side.
Yeah, and that's where I think, I can't look at this model and say, the OTAs aren't really making a whole lot of money, so it's being managed inefficiently, and the hotel chains themselves haven't taken back a ton of share. Those two things, I don't think those two things can continue to coexist. So either something's going to come in and disrupt it. It's not going to be Hotel Tonight or something like that, but something's going to come along and cause some sort of disruption here, or the hotels are just going to finally figure out how to take stuff back and ultimately probably kill the OTAs because with those advertising costs, they can't survive long term if they start losing share.
Yeah, that's fair. Definitely, but I don't know. I'm intrigued by it mostly as the independent observer who sort of gave up on hotel loyalty a long time ago, and sort of watching it unfold. And it's interesting because as a guy who doesn't care about loyalty in the last few years, I've had status, never top tier, but mid tier status at Hilton, at Starwood, at Hyatt, at Club Carlson, at Marriott, and never legitimately earned it. I mean, I got it through legitimate means. It's not like I committed fraud, but I never got it through the 50 stays or whatever, 20 stays or 30 nights or whatever those real requirements are. I got it through a credit card or a partner or a promotion or something else. And it's really interesting to have had the status and had my experiences with going to these hotels and checking in and getting the treatment of, oh, here's your upgraded room or here's your free breakfast or whatever it's supposed to be, and being so totally unimpressed by them across the board that it's an interesting a little bit to me to sort of hear and see some of the people panicking and flailing about and wondering why. And I do get it to some extent, but it's just not my style.
Yeah, no, I get it. And I mean, I'm certainly, the exact opposite, but it's funny. I consider myself a reasonably smart guy. I try not to do too many stupid things. I did not contemplate a scenario over the last few years where I'd be sitting here, month or so away from locking up lifetime platinum status with Starwood and just shaking my head thinking, what a friggin' waste that was.
Oops. Well, hey, the reality is we actually don't know, right? I think one of the things to consider is that they could just say it, and Marriott's the program, suck it up and deal. And that would make some people still very happy, but probably upset a whole lot. But there is entirely a chance where they do try to merge some of the bits and pieces of both programs together. I think the Starwood program is, I think if I remember the numbers from the release correctly, is about 40% the size of Marriott in terms of enrolled members. Something like 50.
Yeah, sounds about right.
20.
Like 24 versus like 53.
Yeah, so 40-50% the size. So it is actually a much smaller program, and there's obviously going to be some overlap in those numbers of registered users. I'm clearly one of those overlaps. I'm sure you are too.
Yep.
So, the combined program may only be 60 million, but it'll be interesting to see if they do sort of throw a nod in there of some of the benefits from each side to try to keep people happy, or if they just say, I don't think the merged group is big enough to say, hi, we're the 800-pound gorilla, suck it, and sort of just piss everybody off or ignore people.
No,
maybe not piss them off, but
yeah, but it's not like Marriott's famous for extending benefits to their customers that are over and above. And certainly the argument can be made they didn't really have to because they were a big chain. You had a Marriott in every city, but I do think that there is going to be some sort of base mentality there on how things should be. And if there's going to be a bleed over from Starwood, I think it's much more likely to be in how they service the guest and the way they treat them than in the relative values of points and benefits and suite upgrades and things of that nature. That's my guess, just because I do think it's likely to ride on the Marriott rails, and there's not going to be a whole bunch of suite upgrade inventory dumped into those rail cars anytime soon, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You certainly could be right, but I think the thing that still a possibility, and I'd say it's not necessarily a long shot, but it's still 10% chance, 20% chance. There's still a chance this thing isn't done. There have been bits and pieces come out in articles over the last 24 hours. The price is a little bit on the low side of what I would have expected to have seen, and it's almost like, I'm not certainly not a Wall Street expert, but it's almost like Wall Street is saying we expect Hyatt or China to step back in here.
Maybe and counter offer is going to come before it closes, or that people are suggesting that's what should happen.
That's what some people are saying. I don't know how much faith I put in it. Only because, I mean, if you think about it, I was reading an article today about how Hyatt had heard from Starwood that Marriott had sweetened their offer, and so Hyatt actually was rumored to have sweetened their own offer, and that thing stopped there. And part of why they stopped was because of the Pritzker's family's control over Hyatt with their supermajority voting. Yeah. And I get all that, but I mean, that also tells me too, the Pritzker family has never struck me as the type that's going to quote unquote overpay for something. Mm-hmm. So, the market thinks it's a possibility. I don't put a lot of faith in it, but it's still something that could happen, and that certainly would be another big shift here. I never saw Marriott coming here as a dark horse to buy Starwood. It sure would be funny to wake up a week from now and see another offer come in to take over Starwood and change things again.
Yeah, well, we'll keep my eyes open. Alrighty. I think that's a wrap. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you?
Yeah, I think it's funny that this is now my second appearance on it, on Dots, Lines, and Destinations, and somehow we've managed to squeeze Argentina into the second one, which just makes my running record of talking about Argentina 2 for 2. We'll have to figure out how to fold it in.
At some point, people are going to think you're from there or something.
Yeah, with a name like Pizzarello, it's got to be. So, I Ed Pizzarello. I write the blog pizzainmotion.com, and most of my social media stuff is in fact Pizza in Motion, Twitter, that Facebook thing that everybody seems to like so much.
Really? I mean, you finally got a profile picture, right? That was kind of cool.
I think somebody did that for me. I got to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Still try with that. It sounded like you had sort of a funny story you wanted to tell about my blog name in the beginning, though.
Yeah, I think it's probably inappropriate. We'll skip it.
Probably inappropriate? 60%.
If I was certain it was inappropriate, I would definitely tell it, but I think it's only probably inappropriate, so I'm going to skip it.
Fair enough.
I am Seth, the Wandering Airman, WANDR.me or WANDRME on most of the social things. This is Dots, Lines, and Destinations. It's at Dots Lines on Twitter. We're moredotsmorelines.com. Give us a shout. Leave a comment. Tell us what you think. Figure out why you're listening. Let us know. It's always fun to hear. Thanks, and have a great trip. Bye-bye.